I walked away from a record deal about 7 years ago. In 2011, I was signed to a major label and had just put out a new album. My wife and I had just had my daughter, who is now 8 years old, in October of 2010. And the year before my daughter was born, I had been gone for over 300 days. I think it was about 330 days that I had been gone. And my marriage was struggling because I was just gone all the time. And when I wasn't gone, I was working, producing other people. I was writing country songs and doing all of that stuff. And I just came to this place. I remember we had a bunch of radio people fly in to come to this show in Nashville, where I was going to introduce my new album to them. And I remember sitting with my manager outside of this little theater where we were playing the show. And I remember just like breaking down and in tears saying to him, man, I don't want to do this anymore. I just think I'm done. And so he comforted me and said, man, I understand how you feel. And then he said, please don't tell anyone in that room what you just told me. But it had come to this place where I just knew that if I was going to save my marriage and honestly, if I was going to become the man that I knew that God had called me to be, that I had to walk away from this thing that I'd literally worked my whole adult life for. And so I went into my record company probably 3 or 4 months after my new album had come out, and I just said, I think I'm going to take a job at a church, and I need to be home. I'll still tour a little bit. If we can figure out how to make this work with me being on the road about 1/3 the amount of time that I am currently, then we can work this out. And ultimately, we just realized that the best thing to do was for us to part ways. And they were awesome about it. My record company was amazing. They're still friends. But ultimately, I felt like what God had called me to was different from what they felt like, they needed from an artist. And so I went back into church world for 6.5 years and was a creative director for a couple of large churches and helped lead worship teams. And about a year ago, I'd been working on that song "Backwards" is on an album that I'd been working on for about 2.5, 3 years, and it had been 7 years since I'd released my last album in 2010. And so in 2017, I released my first album in 7 years, and had been working on this thing, and it were songs that I'd written for my church that ended up not necessarily being congregational worship songs, but they were kind of personal worship songs. And so in 2017, I left my job at my church in Chicago, and kind of just said, okay, God, let's see I feel like you're calling me out of this and back to this. What does this look like? And so I did this. That song "Backwards" is kind of like this theme song for my life now, because what repentance is it's turning from one thing towards another, right? Like when we talk about repentance, what that means is that it's turning away from the wrong thing to this other thing. But I think repentance is not just about sin. Repentance is also about turning from something that's good to maybe something God is calling you to in a different way. And so I really felt like that God was calling me to turn and make this pivot, so to speak, in my life. And so I walked away from the church world and just said, God, do what you're going to do. So now I get to do this on a daily basis again. And I get to be home and get my kids off the bus almost every day from school. And then on the weekends I travel. And so it's just incredible what God is doing, in and through this ministry that he's given me. And so, but I want to take you back to right after I got off of American Idol. I was trying to figure out what I was going to be when I grew up, which is not a good place to be when you're 29. What I was trying to figure out what to do was, I had mainstream record companies that had offered me record deals, and then I had Christian companies. In fact, one mainstream record label had offered me a large amount of money, and the record label that I really wanted to sign with on the Christian side literally offered me 1/10 as much money. And so I was trying to figure out, God, you let me get on this show. When I tried out for American Idol, it was really like this fluke. My friend had just said, hey, let's go down and laugh at bad singers. And I was like, yes, please. Let's do that. That sounds amazing. Because I'm basically a horrible person, or I used to be. I'm not anymore. And so I I went and we did the audition, and then to everyone's surprise, mine the most, I ended up making it through, and it kept going and going and going. And so all of a sudden, God had opened up this door that was really not something that I was seeking out. And suddenly there's record labels that want to sign me. And I remember kind of going like, God, why would you open this door if you didn't want me to walk through it? And I remember going to talk to my pastor and saying like, man, here's what this record labels offer me. This is what the Christian labels offer me. I really feel like God's calling me back to Christian music. I don't know why. And we talked about like his point of view was like, man, like Christians, I really believe that Christians can be any sort of, just about any sort of, you can do just about any job. You can be a lawyer. You can even be a politician. You can be an accountant. You can be a plumber. Just make sure you pull up those pants, if you're going to be a Christian plumber. I think you could be a musician who's on the mainstream side, but for some reason I just felt like God had called me. And so he said, man, you've got this opportunity. I just wonder if maybe you should take that record deal. And I think he really wanted that tithe. I think he really wanted that tithe. But no, eventually I signed this record deal. So as I go in to make my first album, my manager and my producer, they said, you really need to write a song that talks about how you came from American Idol back to Christian music. And as I heard that and I thought about it, that just sounds like a really stupid song to me. And so they kept saying, you need to write this. So I would go into writing sessions and I would say to these other songwriters like, hey, I need to write this song about how I came from American Idol back to Christian music. And they would think for a minute and they go, that sounds like a really stupid song. And I go, you're right. Let's do something else. And so we tried to write this song for probably 10 weeks. Finally, my manager and my producer, they kept saying, we need to write this song. We need to write this song. And so I eventually sat down and I wrote this. And I think it's pretty good. I was on American Idol, remember me. I took a lot less money to take this Christian record deal, so buy my CD. And it just didn't have the emotional oomph that I was going for. And so I went into a writing session with this guy named Tony Wood, and he's a friend of mine. He was an elder at the church that I was going to at the time in Nashville. And one of the best songs, if you listen to WJTL, you have heard Tony Wood's songs probably every hour of every day. He's one of the greatest songwriters and happens to be a friend of mine, and I'm very lucky. And so we were writing on this, I think it was like a Wednesday or Thursday or something, and he shows up and he says, hey, that dumb song you've been trying to write? And I was like, oh, I've written it, and it's good. He said, I think I've got this little snippet of a song, of a line that might work for it. So he opened up his computer and he reads off this line. It says, empty me of me so I can be filled with you. And I said, that is better than what I've got. And so we ended up writing this song. It's a song called Empty Me.